So Stewart Mandel, the Athletic Stewart Mandel, just said that TV numbers show that the Pac-12 might be healthier than we think. Is he right? No, of course he's not right. So Stewart Mandel, he's a well-known guy. He's a good writer, a guy that's really done some pretty interesting pieces. But over the last few months, I've noticed this trend of him really trying to figure out ways to spin the Pac-12 in a very positive light while spinning the Big 12 in a negative light. And he kind of did that again in his most recent article that came out earlier this week. And so I think it's really important to kind of just talk about some quick hitters from his article. So he mentions the fact that the Pac-12 is in good shape because the TV viewership is really stable and they have more views than the Big 12, and that they've done just better, even with the lack of competition. Like, he brought up an Oregon State game that did really, really well, and it was Pac-12 After Dark. And so I get it. I get where he's coming from. I get what he's trying to say and what he's trying to do. But the problem is that he's not spinning the topic accurately. He's trying to take his own stance in this and trying to spin into an article that favors the Pac-12. So I'm going to tell you why he's wrong. So we heard earlier over the weekend that the Pac-12 got their offer from their media deal with ESPN. And the rumor is that number was $24.5 million in that deal. And so the other reports are that Oregon and Washington are going to want more money. So it's probably going to end up being that the Pac-12 schools will get $22 million and Oregon and Washington will get more. I got to be honest. When I heard that number, I thought that it was a lie. I didn't think it was going to be that bad. I was kind of not convinced by kind of everything that I read and heard that it was going to be that low. I felt like it was going to be more like 30, like low 30, maybe right at $30 million. But then I looked a little bit deeper. And the Athletic released news that when USC and UCLA left, they compared the TV revenue of those schools. Garrett, can you throw up those numbers? And so if you look at 2024, the number is $24.2 million for the Pac-12 once USC and UCLA leave. And that's the number that we're talking about right now. And it's very close to the number that was released, that $24.5 million, which definitely made me raise some eyebrows. And you look at the Big 12 right next to it, $43.1 million. That's nearly $20 million in difference. It's right around 19, but my goodness, that's a big difference right there. And so when I saw that number, and then I saw a writer from The Athletic try to spin something and say that the Pac-12 is making all this money and how, it's going to look so good for different media rights companies, I found that to be rather interesting, that he's not using his own content when it comes to his articles. So it led me to believe that maybe that number's accurate. Now, let's just say that it's not. Let's say that's more like $30 million by the end of it. That's still not very significant. That's still not enough. That still doesn't get you to the point where you feel really good about it. And I also think for Pac-12 schools, it's like, why would you want to stay in a conference where they're valuing two schools more than you? That just doesn't make any sense to me at all, that they would want to be there when Oregon and Washington are making more money. So Stewart also talked about kind of the focal point of his whole article was talking about this Pac-12 After Dark thing, or at least that's kind of what you could go back to when you looked at his stats and his analysis, because that was kind of his big thing that he just kept harping on. And while that's great and all, that's the Pac-12 right now. That's them at their floor, is having those Pac-12 After Dark games. They're, getting more views than Big 12 schools when the Big 12 schools are playing on Fox at noon, or the Big 12 has ESPN Plus that they have to deal with as well, and that hasn't grown the way I think many were hoping for it to. And so when you put all that together, of course, those games, when no other games are on, are going to hold significant value. The issue is again, that is the Pac-12's floor right now. That is where they are currently at, and it's their ceiling. They're not going to get better than that. They're not going to be able to add schools that really move the needle a lot unless you firmly believe that San Diego State and SMU are the type of schools that can move that needle. I don't see that happening. So what he fails to address in this article is the part where, okay, so that's where the Pac-12 is at currently. They're not going to be able to get better than that. And then you flip over to the Big 12. So now let's look at the Big 12. So that number, 43.1 million, is the projection for the Big 12. That is after Oklahoma and Texas leave the conference. That doesn't take into account any additions the Big 12 might have. So let's say the Big 12 goes out and gets Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah. Those are probably the four that have been linked to the Big 12 the most. That automatically will raise it a little bit. Now, you could say, okay, but that's just more schools taking from the pie. But I also think it leads into what Stewart was talking about in that the Big 12 will be able to use Big 12 after dark and be able to play a lot of those games and compete with whatever's left of the Pac-12 and be able to get a lot of eyeballs on their games, which I think will be very appealing to various media companies. I would also say if they're able to get Washington and Oregon as well, now they're going to get to play a ton of games after dark and maybe get that Friday time slot. And that would be huge as well, to have all those West Coast teams and be able to play a ton of games at optimal times where a lot of people are going to be watching and where they're not going to be watching other games. That could be massive for the conference. So my point in that is that Stewart kind of pointed out what is the ceiling for the Big 12. And I truly think that if the Big 12 is able to add those schools, they're going to be looking at a very nice contract coming up in 2025. I think there's a chance that they could get closer to 60 million than people really think, because 43.1 again is with just schools they currently have in the conference. I think there could be a big jump if they're able to tap into that after dark special, and if they're able to add some of these bigger markets with some more eyeballs, and especially adding on the West Coast as well. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say that Stewart doesn't know what he's talking about. Stewart Mandel, great writer. He knows college football for sure. But I do think that some people are trying to push certain agendas, and that's okay. That's their job. They're going to write articles about what they see and how they see things going and how they feel like the direction of things are trending. But I'm sitting here telling you that Stewart, in my opinion, did the Big 12 more of a favor than he realizes after going through the research and actually looking at what he is truly talking about when he's evaluating the Pac-12 versus the Big 12. So that's it for today. That's realignment talk for the week. Thanks for joining. I hope we're going to have more things to talk about as August approaches. I think that we'll have more realignment conversations when that time comes, as you know, these schools start making decisions on whether they're going to stay in the Pac-12, move to the Big 12, or if the Pac-12 is going to add some schools as well. But for today, this has been Grayson Grunhafer. Thanks for listening.